How long have we all been waiting for this? My name is Heath Cummings. I am your host, and this is Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am so excited to get this started, and I am joined today by not just two friends, not just two coworkers, but probably the two biggest proponents of growing Dynasty coverage at CBS Sports, my buddy Dave Richard, Dan Schneier. Dave, I know you're fired up. You actually reached out to me less than a month ago, brought this idea back up into the forefront of my mind. Let's go.
I am so psyched. People have been clamoring for more Dynasty coverage from us for years, Heath. This isn't like something that's, overnight or even months old. This is years. And we never really we've talked about doing something about it, but we never did anything about it. And that changed today. Today, we're doing something about it. We're giving the Dynasty fans what they want. And if you happen to be listening and you're not yet a Dynasty player in fantasy, we're going to try and make you one. We're going to try and help you think like one and encourage you to try it. It's so much fun. It's so great. And I'm so glad we're finally addressing, what's the name of the show? FFT Dynasty? It should be called Finally FFT Dynasty because it took us so damn long to actually put it out there.
Yeah, and I think that I'm just really excited to be here as well. I got to be honest. Like Dave said, I've been excited about Dynasty for a while, and I know there's been a lot more traction in the Dynasty community lately because of things like Best Ball Dynasty, which I am a huge proponent of. We'll talk a little bit about that on this show and in the coming weeks. But for me, I'm just excited to see Dynasty grow with us at CBS Sports because one thing that we've always offered at CBS Sports is a dearth of content, and that goes for our in-season, that goes for our preparation for the season, and we're going to now have that with this Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast, in addition to all the content Heath has been putting out over the last 2 years to really grow our coverage on the actual site. And so right now, I'm just excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to talk Dynasty with you too.
And, I thought you guys were going to say people have been clamoring for a for less animation.
Yo, did he freeze?
I think Heath froze.
First show and he froze. But
I thought he was frozen before, but I wasn't sure.
He was about to make an Azer joke because Adam isn't on the show.
We missed a great Azer joke.
Yeah, we'll give him the chance to make it, Dan. But Adam will eventually be on. Just so everybody knows, Heath will host, and we're gonna have rotating guests on it. It'll be CBS folks like me, like Dan. And it'll also be non-CBS folks. I know two names that Heath has brought up. Heath, can you confirm who future guests will be on the show?
Yeah, I would like to confirm that my internet is going to be flawless from this point forward. That's what I would like to confirm, Dave. I'd like to not have internet.
You know what? I'd
like
you to finish that Azer joke. I don't want to miss an Azer joke at any point at any time. We lost an Azer joke there.
The first 3 minutes. It works out perfectly. We'll get back to the Azer joke. Yes, we have so many good guests. I can tell you that next Tuesday, we have confirmed a mock draft review with Scott Fish, Humanitarian of the Year, Person of the Year, the greatest human being to ever exist in the fantasy football universe. Scott Fish will be with us. And then 2 weeks, we will start our I don't know if you want to call it NFL draft previews, prospect previews, rookie previews. Anyway, we'll be starting those in 2 weeks with Matt Waldman, who runs the Matt Waldman Rookie Scouting Portfolio, the resource that I lean on maybe more than any other in terms of rookie preparation. He agreed this morning he's going to join us. We'll have more guests in the upcoming weeks. I cannot wait.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Well, listen, man, if you ever need a stable internet connection, we've got this whole office that was built. Feel free to come on in. We'd love to see you in the office again once in a while. But until then, man, I'm handing this thing over to you. Where are we starting?
Yeah, we are starting with 3 questions. And I think we'll do this a little bit, maybe not forever, but as we're beginning this, I'd like to give people who maybe are in dynasty leagues and want to know how we would suggest to make their league better, or people who have not played in a dynasty league before but want to get involved. I want to give them a little bit of insight into how we like to do it. So I've got 3 questions for you guys. We'll start off with somebody's starting a new dynasty league today. Dan, you can go first. What's the one rule you would suggest?
So these two work sort of in conjunction for me. I think the most important thing by far in Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues is that league activity. It's getting everyone engaged. It's getting everyone understanding what really Dynasty is all about, which is trading, which is moving your roster, that's the only way to do it. I mean, you have the rookie draft. That's extremely important, but you're trading even within that because you're trading for draft picks. So the first and most important rule I always have in Dynasty leagues is that everyone needs to join the Discord, the GroupMe, the WhatsApp, whatever it may be. This is a commission, this is a commish job at first to create that, and then get everyone involved in joining that, and really do your best as the commish to make that fun. You know, you can post a general chat. You can start little private chats for people to talk trade, things of that nature. And working off of that, Heath, this is not necessarily a rule, but this is a suggestion that I really like. And this goes be different for different players, but depending on what you want to do with your dynasty leagues. But I really like the idea of best ball dynasty. I got to be honest. The last two dynasty leagues I've joined, I took over one for CBS Sports. That wasn't a one from scratch, but the last two I did from scratch were best ball dynasties. And I got to be honest, the best ball format is really interesting for dynasty. It changes not only how you approach it in the short term, but it changes how you approach things long term. You start to see different players score differently in that format, and you start to have values. You value the players differently. So that's less of a rule, more of a suggestion. But the first rule I would always say is get a Discord going, get a GroupMe going, or get a WhatsApp going.
So I'm not sure that Dan actually gave a rule, Dave, and he definitely gave 3 suggestions. So let's see, what is your one rule that you think a dynasty commissioner should use when setting up their new league?
I think the rule is if you're the commissioner, you better be prepared to do more work running your dynasty league than you would be a regular fantasy football league. I would defer to you on that, Heath. You've been a commish of both. Is it harder to be a commish of a dynasty league than a regular old fantasy league?
I think it really depends on I don't want to say the quality of your league, but the how similar the other 11 to 13 to 15 managers in your league are. Where it really becomes a lot of work is when you have 4, 5, 6 guys who are really, really into it, and 4, 5, 6 guys who really have played in an office redraft league and really liked that, so they joined this dynasty league, but they're just not wanting to do the work of a dynasty manager. And that creates a lot of headaches for the commission. Not that I am currently the commissioner of a league like that at all. I would not say that about any of the leagues that I'm the commissioner of or any of the managers in those leagues. Let's move on to the second one. What is, and we'll go with you first, Dave. What's the biggest dynasty pitfall? What's the thing that commissioners / managers should be on the lookout for, and how can they avoid it?
All right, so this is where I'll agree with Dan, and this is where I would have given Dan's answer. The pitfall is apathy and having fantasy managers that don't care enough about the league. And so how do you combat that? I think you've got to keep the league fun. You've got to keep it fair. You need to encourage rebuilding. You just have to make sure that horribly lopsided trades either don't happen, or teams that make the lopsided trade that isn't in their favor start putting forward league fees into the future so that they're financially committed. And the same thing goes for a team that's going all in. They're trying to win now. I think if they're trading away future picks, they've got to get fees collected by the commissioner there too, because you want them committed to the future of the league. Both situations, ones where you're not going to veto a trade, but a trade's really terrible. Make sure that owner sticks around. A guy's trying to win now. You don't want him to bail after he doesn't win now, and his team is in shambles the following season because he has no draft picks or anything like that, and all of his players are old while he goes for a championship. And so I think you kind of have to make that clear as the commissioner. Yes, we want you to play. This should be a ton of fun. You should make the championship cool, maybe invest in a belt or a trophy, something that people can have pride, something tangible that they're winning on top of, whatever fees that you might collect. But make sure they know that if you join this league, you're in it for the long haul. And if you do something that suggests you're trying to win now or you're hurting your team, we're going to ask for fees for future years so that you stay in the league. Because I think that's really important to a dynasty league, is that people stay. They're committed. And sometimes you got to make them financially committed in order for them to give a damn.
Yeah, I think, first off, the answer could have been at the start, just curate the managers you invite in the first place. That makes it a lot easier. But it's also hard for a lot of people to find 11, 12 friends or people they want to be in a league with that care as much as they do. I think I have one league where you have to pay for the year in advance. Like this year, when people pay, they're paying for 2024. 2023 has already been paid for by everyone else. And that makes it a lot easier to get those orphaned teams taken over if they get a free year when they take over a really terrible team. Because generally when you have an orphan team, it's not a team that somebody's going to be super excited to try to win now with this year. Dan knows that. He took over a team in our YOLO Dynasty League recently, and he's got some work to do. And then the other thing we have, and I will have this guy on maybe just for a Dynasty Commissioner special episode, because John Bosch actually does a commissioner podcast. He has a rule where if you trade future years draft picks, you must pay for that year. So if you want to trade your 2024 first, you've got to pay for 2024 now. And so I think that works very well also. Dan, I think that we covered the biggest dynasty pitfall. It is apathy. Do you have another answer for like the biggest thing for commissioners, fantasy managers to be on the lookout for when they start their dynasty league?
It's very similar. I had activity down. I mean, that's the key to dynasty football. The great leagues I'm in are the ones that are active, and I think a commissioner plays a big role in it. Dave mentioned, I really like the idea you just threw out there, Heath, by the way. If you're trading pick like 2025 or 2024 pick, you have to pay for that. That I've never heard, and I really like that. I might be bringing that to my league. But what I always like to do is have it. To me, it's always important for every dynasty league to have an active commissioner. One thing I like to do for the one I run with my friends, which is just best ball, but I've gotten everybody really involved and interested, is just bi-weekly during the season and then off-season power rankings. And this doesn't have to read like an article I'd write on cbssports.com. You throw in humor, you mess around with the people in your league. Hopefully you know them. Hopefully they're your friends or you get to know them. But you do little things like power rankings and maybe grade the trade if there's been trades in your leagues, things like that to kind of get people involved, get people thinking about the league and interested.
Yeah, I think especially if you have the time to do something like that. It's funny. I used to do that for a league before I came to work at CBS Sports, and then I was doing too much work during the football season to do the fun thing as the commissioner. So it's maybe easier for some people to do that than it is for other people. We're going to get to one more question. Before we do, I kind of want to, I saw in the chat already, smash the like button. Yes, Adam says that. Please smash the like button. We need your support. We need to show the people who are in charge of these things that, yes, the people really do want a Dynasty Fantasy Football today. Prove that to them so we get to do more of this. I know that's what you guys want. Also, I said it earlier in the show, but I just want to say it one more time. We have Scott Fish coming next Tuesday. We have Matt Waldman coming the following Tuesday. If you haven't caught on yet, we're doing this show every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. We'll be right here. Please join us. Dave, final question before we get into the biggest winners and losers from free agency and Dynasty. Who is the one player you're buying in Dynasty today?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I started to put together a list, and the list has like 5 second-year wide receivers on it. And I don't think it's fair to say that I'm buying George Pickens or Jahan Dotson unless I put where I'm buying them. Would I give up the first overall pick for one of those guys? Definitely not. Would I give up the 5th overall pick in a rookie draft? We're talking rookie drafts. Would I give up that for one of those receivers? Probably not. But if we're talking about maybe 107 or 108 or later, I would buy those guys. But that's if they're available. And I don't know if they're going to be available because the people that took them with first-round picks last year want to see what they get out of them moving forward. So I'm giving a roundabout answer to get to a player that's maybe – I don't think it's maybe. I think he's definitely undervalued and underappreciated by the fantasy community. And I think he's going to get a chance to have a big year, and if not 2 big years. And it's David Montgomery, who's going to Detroit. And I'm not going to say go give up a first-round rookie-only pick for him, but maybe a second-round pick. I've got Montgomery in our YOLO draft. Would I trade him away for a second-round pick? Maybe if I was loaded at running back, I'd think about it. Maybe if it's the first pick in round 2. But I think he's going to have some good seasons in Detroit. I don't think it's going to be many. Could be 2. But I think he's going to be used very, very well there. And I think he could end up being a very strong candidate to finish as a top 12 running back each of the next 2 seasons.
I told you guys Dave was excited about the show. He wants to be on this show. He's talking up David Montgomery. There's no better way to get to come on this show all the time than be a David Montgomery game. We're going to play a game with the winners and losers. And I'm going to start it with Montgomery because I'm always the high guy on him. The game is, and there's no analysis needed here. You just give the answer. too high, too low, or just right. I will tell you where I have David Montgomery ranked, RB23 in Dynasty, and I'll tell you the two guys on either side of him. So it goes Aaron Jones, James Cook, David Montgomery, Rashad White, Cam Akers. Too high, too low, or just right. Dan?
I'm going too low. I'm with Dave on David Montgomery. He's one of my favorite risers in Dynasty. This is going to be the best offensive line he's ever played with in his career by
Dan did not follow the rules at all. It's
there was no
high,
analysis.
Too low, just right. Dave, where are you at on David Montgomery?
Before
So
I get my
bad at
answer,
following
are we
rules.
including rookie running
No.
backs in this? All right, so Bijan Robinson hasn't been ranked by you
Correct.
yet. I think you're a little low on David Montgomery.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. I love it. I love being low on David Montgomery. Dan, who is the one player you are buying in Dynasty Leagues today?
So for me, when I'm looking to buy in Dynasty Leagues, I'm really stingy with my draft picks. I want to make sure that if I'm trading a draft pick away, I'm getting a younger player back in return, first, second, or third year player. And I'm not going to target, like Dave said, those second-year receivers because the price tag is too high. I'm looking for somebody more in the middling range from an age standpoint, and I'm going with Deshaun Watson, especially in 2-quarterback and super flex leagues. He's been the quarterback I've been trying to acquire. He's been the player I'm trying to acquire. I actually really like what the Browns have done to build around him right now. I think his weapons in place are excellent between Cooper, Eli Moore, who's a player who I had as a top 20 overall prospect in his draft class, and I'm not coming off of that just because he had Zach Wilson as his quarterback for a couple years. And then also David Njoku, in addition to his solid offensive line. It's pretty good. It's not as good as it was, but it's solid. And so I like what they've built around him. I like how they're going to, I think, evolve that offense to fit his skill set. So he's the one player I feel like I've been able to acquire in a couple leagues, and it doesn't cost everything to get him because he's a little bit older. There's still a little bit of uncertainty after he had such a bad season last year. But last season, I'm willing to throw out given all the circumstances.
Dan, you've got the first pick in round 2 in our 14-team 1QB Dynasty League. If you had the chance to get Deshaun Watson for that pick, would you do it?
In my situation, the answer is no because I have Justin Fields on that roster. If I didn't have Justin Fields on that roster, the answer would be yes for me.
And you obviously...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Heath. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's a better question for Dan. We don't have to play too high, too low on this one because I have Deshaun Watson and Daniel Jones ranked back to back. And Dan is the biggest Daniel Jones fan I know. Deshaun Watson or Daniel Jones in Dynasty.
I'm not going to get into that comment right now because I'm not that big of a fan of Daniel Jones, but I will say this. I have both of them as big risers. We were talking about risers and fallers, but I have Deshaun Watson ranked higher than Daniel Jones.
Okay. Yeah, I've got them at 12 and 13. So they are at that borderline
That's fair.
QB1 range. And Daniel Jones just a little bit younger. Okay, let's get to the meat of the show. 5 biggest winners from the last month, 5 biggest losers from the last month, and then we'll let you guys throw in one of your own. There's only one quarterback on the list, winners or losers. We'll start with him. Jordan Love was my QB 30 before a month. We'll just say a month ago because I don't want to say before and after free agency. There are some guys who are free agency still going for them, and maybe for a while. He is now QB 17, and I wrote about this today. I do feel like I maybe have him ranked closer to what his dynasty ranking ceiling is than what the floor is, because I don't know that he's ever going to be a top 10 dynasty quarterback. But I do think he's likely the starter this year, and if things go well, he's likely the starter for quite a while.
I think you might be a little low, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I think he does have a clear path to being a long-term answer in Green Bay. And he was a really, really tricky prospect coming out. Because his second to last year at Utah State, he was unbelievable. I mean, there were plays that he made. He looked like Mahomes because he can move out of the pocket and make throws on the run with accuracy. He has a strong arm. I liked it a lot. And then his last year at Utah State, he was the opposite of Patrick Mahomes. He was terrible. He had a bad offensive line, seemed a lot more tentative. And we've seen that tentative play for a good dose of his time. Not when he's played in the NFL. He started one game. He was just okay in the game. He's a bunch of his touchdowns have been catch and run type touchdowns, not necessarily amazing throws by Jordan Love. But if he's going to play all the time, he's going to be given the chance. He's got a potentially great receiver in Christian Watson, and he's got solid receivers along with him. And I bet they're not done at wide receiver in Green Bay. And I think the offense might be better suited for him than it might have been for Rodgers because of his mobility. He's not going to have Rodgers' accuracy, but he'll be close to it. And so, long story short, I don't know if I can name even 15 quarterbacks, excluding the rookies, that I would rather have in Dynasty than Jordan Love.
So, Dan, I think that mobility is an interesting question because I do think he is more mobile than 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. But he's not someone that we think is going to run for 300, 400 yards. I don't think. And with that profile, you pretty much have to be an elite passer to be a top 12 quarterback.
Yeah, that's why ranking is too high for me. I think the way your TLDR of this is perfect for this, Heath. I feel like he's priced a little bit more at his ceiling than his floor. Haven't seen the rushing upside right now. And with the upside comes the rushing floor, right? That's part of why you have Daniel Jones ranked as QB 13. And I think he should be there because he adds the floor of the rushing yards that makes up for the passing. I had a lot of issues with Jordan Love's profile coming out of Utah State. I think Dave broke it down great. He had that great year and then it was a bad year. But the problem with Love for me is while he does make some really Mahomes-like throws on the run, his ball placement overall is not like Mahomes. And I have a lot of issues with his ball placement at all three levels of the field. So for me, I think there's a better chance the Packers are not really committed to him outside of this year. They'll probably try to bring him back because the QB market sucks as long as he's okay. But I think there's more of a lower floor than we're giving credit for right now.
So a split decision on Jordan Love.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to number 2. And this guy, kind of in that David Montgomery discussion, only I was a little bit more excited, I think, than I was even for Montgomery. And that's Miles Sanders. Was RB28 for me heading into free agency, currently sitting at RB15. That will be lower. I would guess he's going to have 2 rookies that get drafted and pass him, possibly a third. So he'll be in the RB17 type range, but I really think he has less of a sharing concern right now with Chuba Hubbard than David Montgomery does with DeAndre Swift. And this Carolina offense, like you'll remember the success they had from Deontay Foreman and Chuba Hubbard down the stretch last year, some monster performances. I think there's a chance they throw it to him a little bit more. He's got Deuce Staley there, who was his running back coach the only time he was used in the passing game in Philadelphia. I think he's a borderline number 1 running back right now. Dan, too high, too low, just about right.
Just about right for me. And I would even say maybe too low. I love everything you said. I think what we saw last year was a really good run blocking offensive line. And the most crazy part about it to me is that was a Ben McAdoo offense. That means they were just running inside zone almost the entire time in the run game. Now you have Frank Reich in there, who's had a more diverse run game. I think it'll only get better there. I love that he's going to be attached to either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. Most likely it might be one of the other quarterbacks. I think most likely them. I think both of those guys are pretty good quarterbacks. And I looked at his contract. I find this interesting. The way they structured this contract, there is a potential out in 2025, but there is still dead cap tied to the 2025 and 2026 season. So this is at minimum a 2-year run for Sanders over there and potentially even longer.
I'm nervous about him. I don't want to overvalue him based on this past year that he had when he was running behind. You want to talk about a good offensive line. It was probably the best in the league in Philadelphia. It was a great offense to be in. If you could run the ball at quarterback, running back, or whatever, you were doing well in Philadelphia. And I have to bring up the downside with him. Not a great pass catcher out of the backfield. Multiple coaching staff soured on him as a pass catcher since his rookie year. He had a good rookie year doing it, and then after that, bupkis. Injuries, specifically hamstring injuries, have been a problem for Miles Sanders in the past. He's 26 years old, and we don't know if the Panthers are going to add anybody else. So if you're thinking about acquiring Miles Sanders today for your fantasy team, I would tell you whatever offer you would make for Miles Sanders, make it for David Montgomery first, because I think Montgomery might end up being better and scoring more touchdowns in his situation than the one in Carolina. And yes, the Panthers could actually be competitive this year. Their defense isn't bad. They've got some great talent there. Offensive line is good. We saw that last year. Scheme's going to change a little bit with Frank Reich there. I still think that Chuba Hubbard will have a role and potentially work on passing downs, if not another running back that comes into play. There's a pretty low floor here for Miles Sanders. I'm going to say you've got him too high, and I think I could find 15 current NFL running backs I'd rather have in Dynasty than him.
It's back-to-back split decisions. Absolutely love it. We're moving over to wide receiver. We had our Giants talk, so now we have to have our Chiefs talk. Skyy Moore, wide receiver 37 before free agency. The Chiefs have done Absolutely nothing. They've been actively trying not to sign wide receivers. Mecole Hardman, gone. Juju Smith-Schuster, gone. Other options to improve the receiving core, besides a potential trade for DeAndre Hopkins, mostly gone. And so if we get to the draft, I don't really even care who they draft. We talked about this yesterday on Fantasy Football Today. It's really hard for a rookie to come in, master Andy Reid's system, and have a big role. We saw that last year with Skyy Moore. The way that they are handling this offseason to this point tells me they think they're okay going into next year with Skyy Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We know MVS is not going to command a large target share. He's shown that he's not going to do that. We have real reason to doubt whether Kadarius Toney can be a full-time player and stay healthy in the NFL. That leaves a huge opportunity for Skyy Moore, who is now my wide receiver 29. Dave, is that too high, too low, or just right?
Let's call it just right, because I'm a fan of Skyy Moore. I think that he's a really good talent at wide receiver. I'm disappointed by what we got out of him in his rookie year, but you talked about it, Heath. Rookies do have a hard time adjusting to Andy Reid. I didn't do the research on it. I'm curious to know if there's been a rookie wide receiver that's had great numbers under Reid. I know Tyreek Hill had some good numbers in his first year.
But it was in a weird way. It wasn't in a traditional wide receiver way, yeah.
Exactly. But his second year, oh, man, he was awesome. So I'm hoping that Skyy Moore takes a jump like that. And, dude, you and I were talking about this on Fantasy Football Today when Kadarius Toney was traded to the Chiefs. We were able to look into the contract situations on Kansas City's wide receivers. We had a feeling Juju wasn't going to stick around. And we had a feeling that Mecole Hardman wasn't going to stick around. And we knew then why they acquired Kadarius Toney was because they could use him next year and that they would believe that Skyy Moore would take the step. We were talking about this in October, November, whenever that trade went down. And now that fruit is going to start to bear out. And I think we're going to see, I don't know if that makes sense, fruit bearing out. I'm mixing my metaphors. I'm excited about Skyy Moore. I think you've got him ranked just right. And even with I don't know if there's a lot of receivers in this draft that I'm going to say better than Skyy Moore, go run and get them. There are a couple for sure. Smith-Njigba off the top of my head, Zay Flowers is another. But I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of receivers that are going to be better than Skyy Moore. And so putting him right where you've got him, I'm great with it. If not, maybe you're a tad too low.
I see Yeedy in the comments. If Skyy Moore is 29 ahead of those guys, I'm selling fast. So it might be okay to buy Skyy Moore at this cost as well, if that's the prevailing sentiment. Dan, you too high, just right, too low?
Slightly just too low for me. So the only drawback for me with Skyy Moore is I think the Chiefs have told us with everything they've done that they believe that Patrick Mahomes can work with any wide receiver group. It doesn't matter. And one of the most underrated part of Mahomes' game that really never gets talked about, and I don't know why, is his mental processing post-snap. It's one of the reasons, in my opinion, he's the best quarterback by far. People don't think of him like that, but he is very Brady and Brees-esque in how he sees the field after the snap. And so they don't need to have a number one type of guy in there, but I still think he's slightly ranked too low because I go back to my film review of Moore from last year, and I had him as a slightly less explosive prospect, a version of Golden Tate. That's not a bad thing. Golden Tate was a super productive fantasy receiver for a long time. Dave and you mentioned the great points of that second year in Andy Reid's system and obviously the opportunity is there. So I'll go slightly too low because I still think I'm going to want to have him more than 28 other receivers once we get to even, October of next year.
We'll be quicker on these last two guys on the rise, on the winners, so we can get to the losers as well. But KJ Osborn was wide receiver 69, now wide receiver 58. I'm still being a little bit cautious with KJ Osborn because I could see the Vikings adding a good wide receiver in the draft, and I'm just not that sure that it won't be Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, the running game, and then KJ Osborn is still kind of a little bit of an afterthought. Are you buying him at a number 5 wide receiver cost? Let's call it a mid to maybe a late second round type pick. Or do you think that the Vikings are probably going to be doing something else at wide receiver?
I think if you're buying him today as a late second round pick, it's worth it because if the Vikings come out of this draft without another wide receiver, and maybe even if they draft one on late day 2 or day 3, you can feel really, really good about KJ Osborn as their number 2 guy. He's fast. He proved to be better than expected as a 7th round pick throughout the course of his career. And I think he's going to get an opportunity, especially with Adam Thielen no longer there. And we kind of saw flashes of that last year with even Adam Thielen on the field. KJ Osborn was getting some good run. So if you're drafting, or if you're acquiring him for a late second right now, I think it's a steal. What's the price tag for KJ Osborn if the Vikings don't draft a wide receiver? It's going to go right up. You're going to rank him higher than this, too.
Might be a mid-second. I do love the fact that Terrace Marshall and Isaiah Hodgins are the two guys on this graphic that I know that Dan has something to say about both of those guys. But Dan, just real quick, KJ Osborn, right in this range, or you think it's a little too high or too low?
Too high for me. I think there's too much of a floor, a lower floor fallout for Osborn if not only the Vikings make a play at receiver, but more importantly, the Vikings are not making any moves towards extending Kirk Cousins. He's going to be off that roster soon. They want to restart. They want to refresh that thing. I don't think that's a good thing for a wide receiver. I think that could lead to some bad quarterback play.
Our last winner, I'll go to you first on this one, Dan. Jake Ferguson was tight end 38 before free agency. The Cowboys, another team that just let Dalton Schultz go, have not yet done anything at the tight end position. Do you think that Jake Ferguson's, first off, do you think he's going to be the starter for the Cowboys this year? Do you think he'll be in that same range? Because Dalton Schultz was not like a spectacular prospect or athlete. Jason Witten before him was, I hate to say he was washed at that point, but I think he was washed and he was still getting 100 and 120 targets in this offense. Does Jake Ferguson just move right into that role, or do you think the Cowboys used a first or second round pick to go get one of these enticing rookie tight ends?
I'm going to try to answer this as unbiased as possible since I went to the school that Ferguson played at and I watched every single game of his career with the worst quarterback play you can ever imagine at Wisconsin. And I really like his talent. I think he's a better athlete, a more fluid mover than Dalton Schultz. And as you said, there is proven production at the tight end position in that offense. I am a little bit worried about moving off Kellen Moore to Mike McCarthy, which I think it's going to be a McCarthy type system, which is not a good thing for tight ends. I mean, Jermichael Finley had some success there back in the past, but overall there hasn't been much tight end production. It's a very linear offense, 11 personnel, 2 outside receivers, then 1 slot, all lined up the same way every snap. So if they do move to that, it's a little scary, but I like the talent. I like the pass production that Dak Prescott's been able to get from his tight end. So I think I would say he's ranked a little too low.
I'm good with it. I think you're fine exactly where you have him. I do worry about what will come to the tight end position in Dallas over the remainder of this offseason. And I do think that Mike McCarthy taking over the play calling is going to be troubling, along with Brandon Cooks being there. Cooks is going to command some targets on top of CeeDee Lamb. And I think the Cooks trade kind of hints at what Mike McCarthy wants to do.
Yeah, I think let's move on to the losers. As we do that, you are not a loser if you smash the like button. If you say in the comments how much you love this show, if you click, share, like, all the other things you could do to help us out, would really appreciate it. The 5 biggest losers from the last month, and we're starting with a guy who, if we were going from the last year, maybe has fallen from, I think, RB4 to RB19 now. It's DeAndre Swift. He was RB8 at the beginning of this month, a guy who was in contention at one point, and it was for maybe just a month, but was in contention for that RB2, RB3 discussion behind only Jonathan Taylor, and things just have not gone well. It does not seem like he has the confidence of his coach, Dan Campbell. Dave, how far I think we'll all agree he's fallen, but is he higher, lower, or right at RB19 for you?
He's right there, and I got to tell you, if I'm a believer in David Montgomery and how he fits into Detroit, then I can't be a believer in DeAndre Swift. And I think the coaching staff just kind of knows what he is at this point, which is explosive runner, yes. Good pass catcher out of the backfield, hell yes. He can absolutely do that. But he's also brittle, and I don't think it's what Detroit wants. I think if you've got DeAndre Swift on a dynasty team, you are praying for a trade. You want a draft day trade. You want him to go somewhere where he can recoup some of that value, because I think he's going to lose it as long as he's in Detroit. So for now, I'm okay with where you've got him. But his upside, to me, it really comes down to whether or not he gets traded, or if he doesn't get traded, what his next team does with him.
For me, that's going to be a little bit too high. I actually probably way too high for me. I'm out on DeAndre Swift. I wasn't very in on him as a prospect. From what I saw, we did some film breakdowns for him for Beyond the Box Score last year. Still the same issues for Swift that I see with players like Etienne and other players I don't like the position. It's poor processing at the line of scrimmage. You don't pick the right hole. You bounce outside. You don't let the block set up. And in addition to that, the injury history. And while he has been a productive receiver, I haven't seen too many one-on-one routes, arrow routes, wheel routes, things of that nature. It's mostly screens and passes around the line of scrimmage. To me, he profiles a lot like Miles Sanders as an overall running back right now, and yet we're paying a premium for him despite him not being in a good situation right now. So he's not a player I will be investing in.
DeAndre Swift. Well, I guess I actually have him behind Miles Sanders. Man, if you would have told me last year that Heath, next year you're going to rank Miles Sanders ahead of DeAndre Swift in Dynasty, I would have laughed at you so hard. Now you're laughing at me. Let's move on to another running back. And this guy is, most of the rest of these guys, a little more lower end, a lot more lower end than DeAndre Swift. And the question might even be, are they cuttable as you prepare for your rookie draft? Devin Singletary was RB 36, did not go to a good situation at all. In fact, I think the only analysis we gave on this move was, man, that's not good for Dameon Pierce. He's probably not going to get as many carries. No one seems to care what it means for Devin Singletary. Is he a must roster player right now, Dan?
I wouldn't call him a must roster player. I do like some of the advanced stats with him as far as forced missed tackles and yards after contact go. I think his contact balance is pretty good. But overall, from a fantasy standpoint, I think he's a better actual running back than a fantasy running back. Has never been an amazing red zone back, never been an amazing receiver out of the backfield. So I don't really see it there with Singletary. But I guess at RB 51, I can go closer to just right because it can't be that too low, really, at 51.
I'd have a hard time finding 50 other running backs I'd rather have than Devin Singletary. There's a lot. There's going to be way more than 30 that I'd rather have. And then the draft is going to bring in anywhere from maybe like 7 to 10 more, maybe more than 10. So maybe after the draft, this ranking makes some sense. But you said, is he even a must roster? If I saw Devin Singletary on the waiver wire in our league, Heath, I would put in, we use Fab. What would my Fab bid be? It would be maybe around 10, 12% of my overall budget.
Right. And I
think, to build that depth at running back.
Yeah, like we will talk about our YOLO Dynasty League probably a lot because it's a Dynasty League that the three of us are in together. I think it's worth noticing that league is a little deeper than the average Dynasty League. It's a 14-team league with 30-man rosters. So you've got 420, man, I did that math fast, 420 players rostered. Now it is IDP, so that accounts for some of the depth, but I do think, I think we can just jump right to the very next guy because he's on the graphic now. Alexander Mattison, another guy. I was hugely disappointed with the fact that he returned to Minnesota shortly after Dalvin Cook posts the highlight video basically saying, I'm staying. My impression right now is that Alexander Mattison will spend yet another year, his age 25 season, as a backup running back behind Dalvin Cook, and that puts him right in the same range as a lot of these other guys who are backup running backs.
For sure. 25 years old, really he's not going to get a chance unless something happens to Dalvin Cook. We don't think that that's going to happen, and I'd be mildly surprised if this turned into a 50-50 backfield. I think Dalvin still has enough juice to be the lead guy for the Vikings, and I think they're going to count on him for that. So I agree. Mattison, let me tell you this. I would see myself spending more of Fab on Singletary than on Alexander Mattison if both somehow magically appeared on our waiver wire in our dynasty.
And obviously, I've got them 51 and 52, so I don't have a strong preference between the two of them. Dan, do you strongly prefer either one of these guys?
I would strongly prefer Singletary. I think this is a terrible for his value to re-sign with Minnesota. I mean, all things aside that you've already mentioned, there's also the factor that KOC, Kevin O'Connell, is a massive pass-first coordinator. I mean, that offense was so pass-heavy and will continue to be that way. So I don't like it at all. Later on in the show, when I give the biggest loser from this month, Heath, I'm also going to, because it works in conjunction with the loser, I'm going to give you a sleeper dynasty player, and I want to see where you rank this, and it's a running back, spoiler, but I want to see where you rank him versus these two guys, and we'll get to that in a bit, though.
I cannot wait to get that. We're going to get to that very, very quickly, because we're going to do two wide receivers at once. These two wide receivers, we'll just do an either or instead of a too high or too low, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, Mecole Hardman were both wide receivers who ranked in the 50s for me in terms of where they were at wide receiver. Now, some of Hardman's was the fact that he was tied to Patrick Mahomes for a while. Peoples-Jones, I actually thought I had a chance to be a good number 2 wide receiver for Deshaun Watson. I don't like his chances of having that anymore either. I've got Peoples-Jones now at wide receiver 74, Mecole Hardman at wide receiver 80. Hardman joining the Jets. What in the world are they doing at wide receiver? I don't understand. They want to keep Corey Davis. They've got Garrett Wilson. They add Mecole Hardman and Alan Lazard. At least Aaron Rodgers has wide receivers, assuming that he ever gets to the Jets. Dave, do you prefer Peoples-Jones or Hardman, and do you really care?
I don't care that much, but I do prefer Hardman because he's speedier. I think he can be schemed up a little bit more. What situation would I have to be in as a fantasy manager to start one of these guys? Now, if it's a deep fantasy league, you're starting 3 receivers and 2 flexes, for example, and these guys might be in your lineup eventually, especially if you've got 12 managers, 14 managers, 16 managers. You talked about that, Heath. But I'll take Hardman in the hope that the Jets brought him in with plans in mind that could last 2-3 seasons.
It's a tough one for me. I'll lead slightly toward Hardman. Donovan Peoples-Jones, a prospect I liked out of Michigan. I thought there were ways that he could develop his game a little bit more, but as I watched him a little bit, watching Deshaun last year, he really only wins in the vertical game, and that's not what he needs to be. He needs to be more of a short and intermediate player to become a fantasy asset. Hardman has won at times in the short game, but the issue I have with Hardman too, this is why I'm not buying either, is that a lot of his production was schemed up by Andy Reid in the red zone, and that's not going to be the case when he comes over to the Jets. So they're both not players I'm interested in, but I'll give the slight lean to Hardman.
So we've got about 4 minutes left, and we've got about 4 players that you guys are going to talk about. I want you guys to give me 60 seconds on, and we'll start with the winners. Dave, then Dan. Who is the biggest winner in Dynasty over the past month that I left off of my top 5?
How about Tyler Allgeier? Because the Falcons didn't do much of anything to help their offense out, and he finished the year strong. I would be very encouraged if I had Tyler Allgeier on my fantasy team.
I'm going to go with Darren Waller. I know it's a homer pick. I tried to keep the homerism out of this podcast, but it's impossible for me, I guess. I have him up to tight end 3. I was considering even tight end 2, but I like Kyle Pitts too much. Look, he joins an offense that schemed up production in the red zone in the second week for a rookie, Daniel Bellinger, who was a 4th-round pick. This offense is going to operate through Waller in the red zone and overall. I see potential for 120-plus targets there. They just restructured his contract, which pushes back a cap hit into next year, so he's going to be here for at least a couple years in New York with the Giants, with Brian Dable, who has a history grooming Gronk and other players there. He was the Patriots tight end coach for 4 years. It was Gronk and Martellus Bennett. Obviously, Dawson Knox, a former 4th-round pick who he turned into a fantasy asset. So, yeah, I think Darren Waller is my biggest winner.
I'm sorry, Dan, because I know you were on the regular Fantasy Football Today yesterday, and so this is the Dynasty version. You said tight end 2 or tight end 3. I assume you were talking about 2023, not that he's going to be 30 years old this year.
I know he's going to be 30 years old, and so that's probably a little too aggressive there. I look at the tight end landscape, though, and that's fine. I should probably move him down for Dynasty a bit, but I look at the tight end landscape, and as far as Dynasty goes, I'm looking to get players who can help me now at the tight end position, because I think a lot of the times these tight ends that are ranked a little bit higher because they're younger don't actually develop. Like a player like Irv Smith, who people loved a few years ago in Dynasty. Where are we at now with Irv Smith? I know he's joining Joe Burrow. That helps, but I don't know. I don't think I would put him behind too many guys in Dynasty. I got, for sure, obviously, Pitts, Kelsey. I guess we have to put Andrews ahead of him, too, though I'm a little bit nervous on that. Who are the tight ends that are younger that you would definitely put ahead of him, Heath?
Hawkinson's got to be there.
Hawkinson and Goddard would be, and I'd say Freiermuth as well, and I would, and Kittle's younger. I would rather have, especially with the news that Brock Purdy's the leader in the clubhouse, to be the quarterback next year.
Sure. All he needs is a working arm.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that will happen. All right. We'll start with you this time, Dan. Who is the biggest loser that I left out from the last month?
My biggest loser is actually Travis Etienne. This is a player who I'm not very high on overall. I watched 5 games of film of Jaguars last year for the podcast, Trevor Lawrence. Every time I watched, I saw Travis Etienne making mistakes in the run game. I talked about bad processing with Swift. It doesn't get worse than Etienne. And then they go out and sign a player who's probably my biggest sleeper that I was going to mention earlier, Heath, that I want to get your take on. D'Ernest Johnson, who had a lot of success and production with Cleveland in very limited sample size. I think he fits what they want to do in the run game a lot better than Etienne. He's a big sleeper for me. I think that we might even see the Jaguars take it a step further and draft another running back who better fits what they want to do in that power run game.
So this is not one that we're going to agree on, because Travis Etienne is a top 5 dynasty running back for me, and D'Ernest Johnson was not a riser I think it's interesting because like those types of things often get missed by the numbers, those mistakes. We've had a couple of those instances where a guy has a big game, but the one that comes to my mind right now, Dave, is Tyson Williams. He was so much faster, but this is Travis Etienne. Like this is a guy that had significant first round draft capital attached to him. It was a different regime. He is also like good friends with the quarterback. I have a hard time believing that he's going to come off the field, but that's exactly why we have you here, Dan. D'Ernest Johnson, deep sleeper. He's free. So if you've got a roster spot, go hold him for a little bit, see what happens. Dave, who was the biggest loser I left off?
What about Javonte Williams? Where do you have him ranked? Because it's been nothing but bad. Oh, I heard that sigh.
Yes.
It's been nothing but bad news for him this offseason. Signing Samaje Perine, I think, was huge for Denver. Sean Payton just talked about this week at the NFL owners meetings that Perine can handle being the starting running back. That's a guy whose value has gone up. We didn't talk about him. I know he's not exactly the youngest running back in the world, but he's somebody that can help you potentially for the upcoming season. I love Javonte Williams. He was a tremendous prospect coming out, but I just wonder if he's never going to get his opportunity to be a feature back in this league.
He was my number 5 running back at the beginning of the month. He is currently, or back in beginning of March, he is currently my number 10 dynasty running back. He absolutely has the potential to fall a lot. I think the Swift comparison is a very good one. I would push back a little bit on the Perine signing being a bad thing for him, just because I think if Javonte Williams gets to 100% this season, then Samaje Perine doesn't matter. I don't think he's the quality of back that's going to take a 100% Javonte Williams off the field. And he's still, at the beginning of this season, Javonte Williams only going to be 23 years old. So that the potential he's flashed combined with his age, at least until we get to training camp, and if he's not practicing, then I may have to lower him a little bit more. But I think that's a good one. He's definitely a loser, definitely someone who fell, but he's still so young and has so much potential. Dan, did you have any last thoughts on Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, who did move up from outside my top 100 into the top 35 running backs? Perine at RB 32, even though he's a 27-year-old.
Yeah, I'm more along the lines of what Dave was saying. I'm higher on Perine than you are, lower on Javonte. Perine is one of the coolest stories in the NFL. I loved him at Oklahoma. I thought he was going to bust in the NFL. Found a way to revive his career. He's an older prospect, so you don't want to go too crazy on, or older back. You don't want to go too crazy on him. Javonte Williams thing scares me from multiple angles, mostly because you compared him to DeAndre Swift. But one thing DeAndre Swift didn't have that Williams had is a really major injury. The Williams injury was not just a regular, tear down there. That's something that I want to wait to see him back on the field. Also, one thing we didn't mention, I don't think it's a great thing that Sean Payton's there for Javonte Williams. Sean Payton never really had that workhorse back during his time with the Saints, and I think we'll see him do the same thing, maybe 2-3 different backs, even though he has a talented back like Williams. So he's somebody who I would rank lower than 10 and definitely be looking to sell.
Yeah, I think what people see when they see Sean Payton, you see he's never had the workout horseback. They see, well, if Javonte Williams can just be Alvin Kamara, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like if we have a role for a back to get 100 targets in the offense, then we don't need him to be a full-time back. We just need him to get 100 targets. Now, I don't know for sure that will be Javonte. I don't know that Payton did that for any other reason than the fact that he had Alvin Kamara and had a back who could do that. I would expect this offense will look a little bit different. There's not a Michael Thomas here either. That, we came into this very first episode of Fantasy Football Today Dynasty, and I was hoping for a 30 to 40 minute show. We're at 48 minutes, which I think means by the Adam Azer standard, I'm doing things exactly the way that I should. I just want to thank you guys for watching the YouTube version. This is going to be for now on YouTube only, so come back every Tuesday, 11 a.m. to 11:30-ish. Maybe it's now 11:55, so maybe we'll go till noon some days. But thank you very much for your support. Please smash the like button. Please get in the comments. Tell our bosses how much you want more content like this, and we will be happy to do it for you. See you next Tuesday.